Now the reason I'm telling you this story is to stress to you the importance of when we say we want a fair, ambitious and binding treaty. The reason we need a binding treaty is that if our leaders do not agree to a legally binding treaty here, and if you just get a wishy-washy nice words on a piece of paper called a political agreement or communique, then I can tell you a fair number of those leaders will forget what they signed by the time they get back to the capitals back home. So if we're going to hold them accountable, we need to recognize that they have broken public trust with us around addressing poverty, around addressing human rights, around addressing the HIV/AIDS pandemic, around addressing gender inequality, and there is no reason for any of us in our right state of minds to expect right now that we can take the word if it's not a binding treaty. Now, I've been asked to reflect on the linkage between poverty and climate change. Many of us have been saying that the struggle to avert catastrophic climate change and the struggle to end global poverty are two sides of the same coin. As we sit here, my dear brothers and sisters, every year we are already losing 300,000 people from climate-related impacts. As we sit here, we know that we can talk now about climate refugees in parts of the Pacific, in parts of Africa, and in virtually every part of the world, where people are having to move from where their ancestors and so on have lived and farmed and did agriculture and so on, because already the impact of climate change is real and is extracting its most brutal and the first price. Now, of course, we all know that even though it is industrialized countries that have been most responsible for the climate catastrophe we find ourselves in, sadly, it is people in poor countries who've been least responsible for the catastrophe who are having to deal with the first and most brutal impacts. So what does that mean, though? Does that mean that rich and poor countries need to start fighting with each other? Or does that mean that we actually have to recognize that climate change is different from other challenges that we face? We either get it right as rich and poor countries acting together as part of a common global family, and we can deliver to our children and grandchildren a decent, safe and secure life for the future, or if we get it wrong, we are all sunk. So it's not a question that some countries can safeguard themselves and be okay, and other countries can actually, survive. So while we put more pressure on the leaders of the rich nations of the world, we also say to our leaders in the developing world that we cannot bury your head in the sand and say, well, okay, we didn't really cause most of it, so therefore we're not going to do anything. Basically, we have to share the responsibility of this crisis. It has to be done in a fair way that recognizes history, but we do not actually deliver to our children and grandchildren the security that they need if we do not recognize that actually time is running out very, very fast. The other issue I want to just spend a few minutes on, how many, and I pose it as a question to you, how many of you remember a slogan that's, or have come across a slogan that says, think globally, act locally? Most of you. Okay, now when that slogan first appeared around the time of the Rio conference in 1992, what people understood by that slogan was irrespective of the issue you were trying to tackle at the local or national level, you needed to understand how global institutions, global processes, global discourse has an impact on what you can or cannot achieve at the local or national level. However, one of the ironies of the moment of history that we are all living in is that when democracy came to countries like South Africa, the successor states of the former Soviet Union, countries from Latin America coming out of military dictatorship in the early 1990s after the fall of the Berlin Wall, real power was shifting from the national to the global levels. So today, we cannot address the issue of trade, of climate, of environment, and so on as solely national issues. We need to address them as global issues. So today, if we can have you know, the Prime Minister of Maldives, who is passionate about climate change, he is as radical as any one of us are here. You know, what we are saying, he's virtually saying exactly the same. But he's not going to go anywhere because as one country, they cannot succeed. So not only on climate change, but on other issues, we also have to recognize that today we have to act across our national interests and recognize that each country's national interests, if you think about it thoughtfully, sensitively, and compassionately, are all connected. I want to spend a few minutes though just to say that already there is evidence that climate change is not only taking lives, but is also reversing some of the successes we've had in addressing poverty. But when we look at a crisis, how many of you are from China? Please raise your hands. How many of you speak some Chinese? Okay, great. Now, I'm told that in the Chinese language, the character for crisis and the character for opportunity is exactly the same exactly the same character. So our task right now is how do we turn this crisis into an opportunity? And I want to suggest to you that we can do that. We can develop a different kind of world that is fair, where we share the resources, and we have respect for future generations that are going to come. So one simple, big strategy that we can do is to aggressively promote a green economy, by which we mean we generate jobs which are not harmful to the environment, but also which actually add value to the environment, but at the same time address one of the biggest problems we have on this planet, which is the fact that a lot of people do not have decent work. And let's just imagine that a little bit. What could that mean? This could mean we could affect society from top to bottom. Our carpenters, our bricklayers, our construction workers, and so on. If you want to build energy-efficient homes, for example, they all need to be retrained, retooled, and we can generate millions of jobs rather than putting false hope in expensive and unsafe technologies such as nuclear and coal and so on, whereas in fact we can, drawing on what we have in terms of renewables, we can actually generate economic growth on a scale that actually we've never seen before. Why is it not happening? The answer is simple. There are people who have vested interests in oil, gas, and a whole range of polluting industries who actually are holding back the kind of progress that we need, and sadly, too many of our politicians are in their back pockets.